So in the last 10 days or so, the Supreme Court said the president can't commit any crimes, bribery is legal, agencies have no authority, and homeless people can be charged with the crime of not having a home. One thing that's good about social media is that this, for the first time, people talk about Project 2025, and it's become more of a mainstream talking point. But people that haven't been paying attention to politics think this is a new thing that's coming out of nowhere. No, in fact, the truth of the matter is that this has been a decades-long project. Project 2025 is just the latest publication out of a series of books called Mandates for Leadership, a group of books published by the Heritage Foundation. The first mandate was given to Ronald Reagan in 1981. Help halt the affirmative action policies and remedy past discrimination against women and other minorities. Specific suggestions related to spending included raising the defense budget by $20 billion in the fiscal year 1981, increasing it by an average of $35 billion over the next 5 years, which they did. Reduce personal income tax rates by 10% across the board, which they did. Here you got mandates 2 and 3. Mandate 4, 5, 6 and 7, and the latest one, Project 2025. Now, what led up to this stuff, right? What led up to this conservative takeover, this corporate takeover, the Reagan Revolution of the 80s, the deregulation, the weakening of unions? Where did all this started coming from? It actually came from this man here, Louis Powell, who was put on the Supreme Court by Nixon. But before Powell got put onto the Supreme Court, he made his fortune as a corporate lawyer, representing big tobacco company Philip Morris. And Powell's job was to counteract critics that claimed that cigarettes were causing cancer. And because of this study here that came out in 1950, everyone knew, especially tobacco executives, that their product was causing an epidemic. So the tobacco companies pulled their resources together and created their own little research project with the express purpose of twisting the scientific consensus and building a foundation of research sufficiently strong enough to arrest any continual attacks and brush off any kind of criticism, which is this right here, Frank's statement to cigarette smokers. Now, this is the same tactic that will later be replicated by the oil industry, because it was the oil industry's own scientists that confirmed that the burning of fossil fuels was beginning to endangering the environment and contributed to potentially terrible global fucking climate crises. And by 1968, it was more than clear that these businesses were creating serious worldwide environmental changes, such as the melting of Antarctic ice cap, a rise in sea levels, warming of oceans, and a whole host of other fucking terrible scenarios. And of course, Big Oil took the playbook out of Big Tobacco by using their resources to fund spurious science and often relying on the same individuals and companies to break consensus and inspire falsify fucking skepticism around climate change. The whole goal is to fucking muddy the debate, so no real fucking progress actually happens. Now, Powell, understanding these strategies all too well, came out with the Powell Memo in 1971. Now, this memo was supposed to be confidential, but it was later released to the public. But this was a memo addressed to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce at the time, Eugene Sindor. And this was a memo for wealthy Americans and businesses to outline a strategy for a complete takeover. He thought the American system was under broad attack. And of course, this broad attack was coming from the communists, the new leftists, and other revolutionaries who wanted to destroy the entire system. And that this threat was coming from all sectors of American society, including from the universities, the media, and the culture itself. Keep in mind, you just had the Cultural Revolution of the 60s just happen. And Powell also went on to say here that businesses have not been trained or equipped to conduct guerrilla warfare with those who propagandize against the system and have been unwilling to marshal their resources together and to step into the arena. So what the Powell Memo was doing was calling for the right, the oligarchs, wealthy businessmen, to pool their resources together in the development of a project that replicated like the efforts of Big Tobacco to counteract the influence of academics, science experts, and persuasive voices in the culture by creating their own institutions and organizations. You know, these people, these right-wing oligarchs frightened by democratic and reform movements, the wealthy invested heavily in conservative think tanks to develop strategies and policy to undermine expertise as a means of defusing problematic findings and create a media complex of pundits and personalities to win support in the public and muddle the debate. And since that Powell memo, the business class of our country has absolutely been pooling their resources together. The number of corporations with public affairs in Washington grew from 100 in 1968 to over 500 in 1978. In 1971, only 175 firms had registered lobbyists in Washington, but by 1982, nearly 2,500 did. The number of corporate PACs increased from under 300 in 1976 to over 1,200 by the middle of 1980. On every dimension of corporate political activity, the numbers reveal a dramatic, rapid mobilization of business resources in the mid-1970s. That's the Powell memo effect, which fueled the Reagan Revolution, which fueled the corporate takeover, which is what's driving policy right now that is firmly behind Donald Trump, ushering this new era of conservatism. This agenda has been decades in the making. Trump has just been able to expedite that agenda because of populism. They've used him as a battering ram to shove down all their fucking agenda. And as you can plainly see, as the Supreme Court is doing what it's doing right now, and the Project 2025 that seemingly every Republican seems to stand behind right now, as they all stand behind Trump, it's quite obvious that this authoritarian takeover is right on the cusp of succeeding. And if it does, it's going to get bad for a lot of people really fucking fast. Anyway, good talk.